Why don't you just call us that? You can tell us that. You
Well,
don't have to type it.
I just wanted to get the chat started.
Well,
So,
we open up episode 111 with y'all some bitches.
Good way to start.
so
I do want to throw this out here up front. We haven't called out a lot of businesses and things like this. This really isn't about. Well, I guess it is a business, but it's more charity work. So one of our listeners, Gary, and he's as old as we are, and probably as broke as we are, and he's gone through many of the struggles that we've all gone through. All the folks that are prior service military veterans, and not just veterans, but a lot of folks in general, and you have at the end of the day, part of your and this will go in this book that we're going to write. Part of it is having purpose, right? You have to have some dedication to something. You have to have some purpose to your life, and especially when you get to folks that after they've retired or after they've moved on to they've done a lifetime of work in one field, they go somewhere else. You still have to find some purpose, and one of the organizations that he's working with now is Mission 22. You can go to their website, www.mission22, the number 22.com. So Gary, and by the way, I've volunteered both of you guys to help him out with this, is going to do a ruck march. So it's good because the money goes to obviously helping out veterans that are struggling with PTSD. Something that's I haven't seen a whole lot of this, but part of their mission statement is to help out as far as memorial services and things like that, because we always hear the 22 a day, right, as far as veteran suicides, and you always talk about the help up front, and unfortunately, at least 22 a day don't get the help, and I don't see too many things out there that help out on the back end as far as memorial services and those type of things. Every now and then out here in Phoenix, we see a call out that, hey, a veteran passed away and no family members or anything. Can people come out here and at least attend or whatever? And I think they play a pretty good role in that. But anyway, I need to find out more info from him as far as his date. But I think he's going to do a weighted ruck march of at least like 100 pounds. I've heard that he's doing 22 miles. So what I told him was, give us the date, and Luke and Josh will support him. Kind of like with the Mogadishu Mile, where they do it across the country. You can represent, so you guys will get a ruck, throw in 100 pounds, go 22 miles, and help out the cause.
100 pounds, no.
So
no.
For those out there, you guys, including the listeners, if you don't want to do that, your other option is to go to www.mission22.com and just donate. Or I think if you look at our,
does it have to be 100 pounds?
No, I think I just made all that up. 100 pounds sounded good. Yeah.
Okay, good. And we can count Darren in on that too.
Yeah, there you go.
And yeah, so I'll get Darren on board with that. Our listener Darren, to give him a shout out every time. But yeah, as long as it's not 100 pounds, man, no.
Well, Josh said
on
it.
Gary.
He said like 2 episodes ago. He's like, "Hey, guys that are out there running, with 100-pound rucks on their back, like your body will thank you later if you stop. Yeah, don't do any of that stuff." And I think he's doing something, he's doing some pretty lightweight, and at least it'll be enjoyable for him. But those that, I think I posted a Taylor on our Facebook page. If you're so inclined to want to help out and donate, it's a good cause. It is a good cause. I looked up the company today. Went through a thing. Nobody's perfect as far as all their ratings, but they seem to be very legitimate and serving a legit service.
Can you pick your own route, or how does that work?
Dude, you can walk around your house. I don't care.
No, yeah, but that's what I'm asking about. The thing is, like, you could just pick a route and go 22 miles.
Okay. I made it to 22 miles too.
Oh, you did?
Well, yeah, Mission 22. It just went well with Mission 22 miles. So yeah, I threw out 22 as well. I think you can literally just go ruck as far as you want to. It's more just to bring awareness to the cause, and folks that they like to donate $1 a mile or whatever it is. But for our listeners out there who are so inclined, definitely head to our Facebook page. We put the link up there, or you can go to mission22 number 22.com and support them directly if you so choose.
I know Josh is typing. I'm kind of waiting for what he says, but Josh, do you think that you would? So. Josh, do you think you could do a 22 miler, just say with let's just go super light with 25 pounds?
Yeah, I could do it. Yeah. It's what's gonna happen about 24, 36, 72 hours after that. That's the real question. What shape will I be in afterwards? I can do it. I mean, but I think the three of us, we can get through anything. It's just gonna be how long is it gonna take me to recover?
Well, I'm looking at doing a couple of things, and we talked about this last year. I think, and it was still shut down because of COVID. And that was the White Sands, the
Mhm.
Baton Death March. I think it would be really fun. I think a few members of our audience, I've already got some buy-in from some people. It's like if we put together a team, we could make it like a C3 event where the three of us come out there and we just kind of kick it out at White Sands and do the event. And I think that this would be a good start for me to just set a goal and do this Mission 22 thing, and then maybe plan on that White Sands, Baton Death March. And I'm also planning. I'm not going to give any details of this yet because Darren knows, but I'm looking at doing an ultra, not an ultra marathon, but it's an ultra for 55 hours. You're just moving for not 55 hours straight. The goal is to get 100 miles, and I think 100 miles in 55 hours is totally doable. But I'm looking at doing that either this year or next. I'll probably do it. I don't know, man. Maybe next year, 50 years old, do that 55 thing, just to see if I can do it. And of
I'm
course, you
sure you
wouldn't do that.
can.
Well, yeah, you
It's
wouldn't do
just
it all
like Josh
straight.
said. It's not
Yeah.
that you can't do it. It's hey, what are you going to pay for the next week because you
And
did it?
Darren says, well, and Darren's like a natural athlete. He's goofy as hell, but he's a natural athlete. He's the kind of guy that almost doesn't need to train for something like that. He could go out and just do it and
I
gut
hate
it.
him.
I know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And
for real. I hate you,
but for
Darren.
me, I've got to like get my body ready for that. There is no way I could just, I'll walk for a couple hours a day and then walk for 18 hours straight, sleep for 6 hours, 12 hours, and then like that. I've got to get my body ready for it. My body would shut down. I know it would. My joints would be like, nope, not doing this. But
Hey, when is the Baton Death March?
oh, you had to ask. I want to say it's in the spring.
Yeah.
I want to say it's in the spring. I'll look that up and get back to you, but I want to say it's in the spring. I know it's when it's not too hot, but let me get back to you on that.
Yeah. Well, it's something. I mean, I've always had my eye on the Baton Death March. It's always something I wanted to do. I think it's cool, and I know there's different divisions you can get in. And I know one of our listeners, Craig. I know he's done it a time or two, and you can go the heavy division and the light division, and no ruck whatsoever division, and stuff. So
March 19th.
Yeah, March 19th.
So you better start training.
Yeah, we should set it for like 2024. We should set it for like 2024. That's what we're gonna do. Listeners, hold us to account. There's plenty of time to plan. That's a year out. I think the three of us could figure out how to get in the same place at the same time, and we probably have a really good time. We could probably put together a couple of teams. I'd have to look at the divisions, but that'd be a lot of fun. We get T-shirts and everything. We get T-shirts made.
yeah,
The C3,
and that's right after we come back from Cancun. Yeah, it'd be great, dude. Yeah, sounds good.
As they send out the search and rescue team to go get all three members of C3 that are still on the Baton Death March.
Y'all be okay. It's only a week.
Speaking of which, we've been pressuring Luke. So Josh and I, we have these Apple Watches and stuff, and it's pretty cool because if you have the fitness stuff and you use it to track your fitness, you can share. And it's actually pretty cool because I get to see what Josh does every day. Dude, and I have to admit, okay, now granted you're always running around and doing things or whatever, but you burn a lot of calories a day, man. Like you're moving a lot, which is pretty impressive because if you and for those that have the Apple Watch and do the share, you can go look at it and it shows you, I can basically see how far he went, how many calories he's burned, and what his goals are. We both have the same goals, and they're very low, so we can make sure we hit them every day. But certain days that I don't do a whole, because I work from home and I sit at a desk a lot of times, and I try to get up every 10, 15 minutes and walk around. But I tell you what, I mean, Josh, you hit like 1,200 calories a day in movement, like every single day. It's impressive.
Yeah, man. Trying to stay moving like a shark these days. If I quit moving, I'll die.
He puts it on his dog.
So, that's true. I mean, I get the dog out in the morning because he needs it and he enjoys it. So
look at like today.
For me
like
too.
Today, I went to the gym. I worked out. For over an hour lifting weights. I'm at 89% of my goal, 671 calories out of 750. Josh is at 154% of his goal, 750. He's at 1,155 calories. Unreal.
Well,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I got up this morning and hit the gym, before breakfast, before anything. I've been, making sure that trying to stay on top of that. And then, like I said, man, it's just being on your feet all day, off and on. And then, yeah, I think the gym in the morning really helps. But back home, it's, I'm taking the dog for a walk in the morning and at night, for the most part. So that's like 4.2, 4.3 miles a day just walking the dog. Right. That doesn't include, whatever workout I'm doing, during the day. So yeah,
dude,
it just get moved, man. I can see, and at first I was concerned about weight, right? I was looking at the scale like, man, I needed to come off. I needed to come off. But I've been trying to get my body weight and protein, during the day, and trying to limit grams of fat and stuff like that. I've noticed my weight has gone down a little bit, not as much as I thought it would have, but dude, I've dropped like probably 3 inches off my waist, in the last like
That's awesome.
5 weeks.
that's
So
that's
that's
really
really, so now I'm not so concerned about the weight and what the scale says. Now I'm just like, okay, I'm just keeping an eye on my waist, because, and
that's
I can tell that I've definitely put on a little bit of muscle. So
that's that's
it's
really
it's
fascinating.
good.
That's really fascinating, Marie Osmond. So no, I'm joking, but it almost sounded like an infomercial for because this really works. Yeah, it's dropped inches off my waist,
Hey,
but
guess
yeah,
what?
that's
If you don't shove bear claws down your gut and you work out every day, you lose weight. Funny how that
so.
works.
No, Josh, for real, congratulations. That's really good for you. But get this. So one of our listeners, Chris. Oh man, this guy. He's a firefighter there in Lubbock, and the guy's just a picture of health. Like he's the kind of firefighter you want pulling you out of fire. You know what I'm saying? He could do it. And this dude texted me the other day, and he's like, "Hey, that 12-3-30 workout you do, I did that. It's pretty good." He's like, "You do it with a weighted vest, right?" And I'm like, "Man, f you, not yet." Yeah, let's compare ages there, Chris. What are you picking on the old man? It's like a
How old is
weighted
he?
vest. I'm not quite sure. I think he's either in his late 30s or early 40s, but he's got to be.
Whatever.
But he's just in really good shape. You have to be if you take your job seriously as a firefighter. You're training for an objective. You are getting your body ready not to look good with them show muscles. Uh, but man, I mean, when you're working out, it's like, okay, I got to be this strong so I can, not one function with how many ever 100 pounds of gear they have on them, because that stuff is heavy, and then also to pull somebody out of a fire, not let alone tearing down a ceiling or holding that giant ass hose and all that stuff. I mean, those guys are no joke, and they should be no joke.
That's what
Some
she
of them
said.
are fat bodies.
But are they hitting the equity benchmarks across the board with their
I don't
hiring?
I oh well, that's important. That's extremely important. Our age. Yeah, our age is
So
old.
it's funny. It's funny you asked that, Roger. One of my neighbors, longtime firefighter, Chuck, and good, just a super super good dude. Longtime firefighter here in the area, and he recently left the fire department, because of equity hires, because of the diversity hires in the firehouse. He said the culture, 100% changed. You know how we were, back in the military. I mean, you look at any platoon, you look at any pretty much any size element, and there was a mix, right? There was white folks, there was Hispanics, there was black people, right? And so and it wasn't uncommon for us to sit around and joke with each other and tell very inappropriate jokes. Jokes that would get
Sure.
you canceled now, in a heartbeat. And Chuck was telling me, we were talking one evening out in the yard, and he said the firehouse used to be like that. Right, it was just sit around. And it was pranks on each other, and making jokes, and inappropriate jokes, and stuff like that. And he said that's all gone now. He said now you have to watch your P's and Q's. You have to, you can't joke around with each other. You can't do pranks on each other, because he said flat out it's gone woke. And he said a lot of good firefighters, within my area, he said, have left. It left the fire departments entirely. A lot of them are taking EMT jobs and stuff like that because a lot of them are obviously EMT qualified. And so I think not only are we looking at depleting our police forces around the country because of this, our military is obviously diluted, but the fire department says, well, I'd be curious to know what to hear Chris's thoughts on that, Luke. Kind of is he seeing that within his department or within his firefighter friend circles, and kind of what the temperature is at
We
his
should
at his fire station.
we should get both those guys on if we can, and just open up the topic and just let them kick it back and forth, because I bet that would be a pretty good episode. Just people hearing about the firefighter life, and because he tells me stories that are just fascinating, and a lot of them don't have to do with fighting fires. It has to do with being a first responder, and administering Narcan to guys who've overdosed and stuff like that. But yeah, a lot of folks, I guess, they're in North Carolina are leaving the fire department and going and shooting up electric stations. That's not funny, and we're
Hey
not
man,
accusing
you
anybody.
got to you gotta have something to do, I guess. Um, they're
I,
transiting between here and Washington State, shooting up electric stations. I
so
guess.
I've had so many people, and now I know it's old news. And Roger and I kind of touched on it in episode 110, the last one. Josh wasn't able to weigh in. I think we know more now than we did before. And Roger, you were right, according to the Pentagon at least. You were right about something you said last week. They were tracking it since it took off. It's hard to know what to believe, but again, I've had a lot of people hit me up on text, and I'll give Rodney a quick shout out. He's like, "Look, if I was on social media, I would engage, but this dude literally is not on social media." So, Rodney, you get a pass for texting it and not messaging us on Twitter, Facebook, or whatever. But yeah, Roger, I mean, I know we touched on it. It might be a topic that some people are tired of, but maybe we could kick it around again about the balloons and the stuff we're shooting out of the sky that we have no idea what it is. So the balloon plus three others. I mean, any follow up thoughts since last week?
Yeah, before you give me too much credit, that IC is tracking this and this and that, then they come out and they're like, "Oh yeah, so our $400,000 missile missed the balloon and is now laying in the bottom of Lake Huron because we're just not used to shooting targets that move that slow." I'm like, man, that's something that I could have done without. You could have just not told me that, and I would have felt a lot better about everything because they came out and they listed the city. Yeah, we tracked it, and again, I do believe there was a little bit of truth in what our opinions were last week about it. And I think the government just didn't want to respond to it. But, at the end of the day, and I forget the exact terms again that Josh had used or the exact explanation, but there comes a point that, hey, look, once the cat's out of the bag, the cat's out of the bag. Make a statement, be deliberate about it, and then close the book and move on. And now they're talking about, three or four that have been shot down, and now they're not even sure. They think, well, hey, a couple of these might just actually be weather balloons, because of the size and the movement and this and that. So I don't know if we're just shooting down everything now in the sky. It's like, hey, if it's up there, dude, we're shooting it. If you've got one of those inflatable gorillas on top of the car wash because they just opened last week, it's probably going to get nuked. I mean, it's
The
it's almost
balloon festival in Albuquerque, that shit's been canceled, homies.
yeah. I ain't getting a no balloon. So it's just crazy because it's the sign of this administration. They are so reactive, and it's not even like an immediate reaction. It's like, okay, prod. Now everybody gets fed up. No, okay, now we just got a knee jerk, and we're just gonna shoot everything down. Oh yeah, well, some of this stuff is actually not a threat. Some of it's just like helium balloons from a birthday party, and yeah, we're just firing around $400,000 missiles that apparently aren't capable of knocking down a slow moving object. So, dude, the truth is always somewhere there in the middle. I'll throw it over to Josh. I know he didn't really get a chance to speak on it last week, not being with us, but now some more news has obviously come out. What's your thoughts on, do you think the administration was truly tracking this from the beginning? From the way it looks, we pulled up some Googling that, balloons, weather balloons. I mean, there's like thousands of them in the air all the time. So I don't know. What's your thoughts on it?
So I think they were tracking it from the beginning. I think they just didn't care. Honestly, I think it was just incompetence and indifference on their part because they obviously they were tracking it. I mean, even NORAD came out and said, yeah, I mean, we knew the second that it left, that it was over the Pacific, coming out of China, they knew about it. So whether the White House was briefed on it, who knows, right? I don't know what's in the president's daily read book, or if he takes his briefings, or if he's awake for his briefings, or if he knows that he's receiving a briefing, right? Because who knows what Joe Biden's current mental faculties are and their capabilities. But it's just it had that civilian in Montana not looked up and said, "What is that?" We would have never known about it, and that balloon would have been allowed to traverse the country and make its way around the globe, back to supposedly back to the motherland. And the whole time that it's traversing the United States, that's fine. The administration's like, no, it's not a big deal. It's just a weather balloon. Like this happens all the time. It's that Joe Biden comes out and is like, look, it's not a threat. Don't worry about it. So, okay. Well, if it's not a threat, why did we shoot it down? Right. And now CNBC reported on February 9th that they were able to recover pieces of it from the bottom of the Atlantic, where it was shot down at, and that it has multiple antennas for signals collection on it. Right, that's what CNBC is reporting, and even Kirby came out and reported, yeah, it's got some intelligence collection capability on it. After Biden, reassured us that it's not a threat, it's not a big deal, it's just a weather balloon. They're everywhere. This happens all the time. You're like, okay, well, which one is it? Right? You're either incompetent or you're lying. At this point, I can't chalk it up to lying. It's just you're just so incompetent, and now you're just trying to cover it up, with your lies. Then we had the one shot down over Alaska, however many days later that was, and it was like, oh, they shot down an unidentified object. It's pilots are have supposedly reported back, it looked like it was hovering. We couldn't see a discernible, anything on it, blah, blah. It's like, I guess it's just like, the Goodyear blimp with nothing on it, like just kind of, suspended in midair. And, we shot it down with a $20 million missile. And you're like, that was a great use of my tax dollars. It's a good thing, it's a good thing the F-22, doesn't have a chain gun on it. Why don't we use that instead of a $20 million Raytheon missile? And then the shoot down over Lake Huron, and the Pentagon comes out right after that and was like, yeah, we're probably not going to be able to recover the one that we shot down over Alaska or the one that we shot down over Lake Huron. It's like, what? We can dig one up from the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, but we can't. But the Great Lake is that's a bridge too far, right? Supposedly now they're working on it. Now we're attempting to recover it. And it's like, come on, there's no video of it. There's no, and now you're like, oh, this is just too hard to recover. Hey man, I've been to Alaska before. I'm stationed in Alaska. Like, give me a grid. Oh, we'll go do it, man. Hey, that's a C3. That's a Bataan Death March right there. That'd be a great trip. It's just, I think I think those balloons are prolific. I think they've been around for a while. It's just somebody finally saw one. Somebody brought it to the attention of the American people, and now the administration has to do something about it. And now I think they're overcompensating, with these shoot downs of these, objects that nobody's ever going to see the light. It's not going to see the light of day because they completely botched the one that was real and that floated over the entire country. And so now they're over. They're basically just overdoing this part to show, hey, we're protecting the American people, and it's all kabuki theater. It's wagging the dog. That's all it is. So that's my thought on Chinese spy balloons.
No decision making. It's Josh got it in a nutshell. It's like you're either incompetent or incapable, And I think they're just demonstrating incompetence, because if you follow this story pretty close, and it's been, relatively quick news cycle on it. I mean, okay, so the reason we didn't shoot down the first one is the very reason we shot down the second, third, and fourth. It doesn't make any sense. And there were a lot of rumors that we shot down one of our own balloons, National Weather Service or something. I mean, and that disappeared real quick. So that tells me, well, okay, it was probably true. And I tell you, when Karine Jean-Pierre says, "Now Americans shouldn't panic," that's about the time I start panicking. It's like, wait, what? You don't know you're not going to rule out like a no joke interplanetary flying object? You're not going to rule that out. You're not going to rule that out. Incompetence, man, incompetence. So it's like Josh mentioned the PDB, the Presidential Daily Brief. Now, let's just say that they're telling the truth. And now I think about it, I don't doubt it. We've got so much money wrapped up in the Intel community. We've got so many sensors out there tracking so much stuff. But my faith is a little bit shaken on, the process of filtering that into actual decision makers who can make decisions, and it going all the way to the buck stops here sign on the president's desk. But so let's say we did track it since takeoff. Like Josh said with a PDB, I doubt that balloon taking off from that island or wherever it was, I doubt that made it into the PDB, right? It's something worth tracking. There's an intelligence requirement out there for it. But it's like, and we all know how broke the IC is. I'm always railing on that to my colleagues and stuff, and they all agree. Did you hear that, D? They all agree, because D's like, "You're not talking about me." She always thinks I'm calling her out, man. I'm not. I'm saying the exact opposite. But again, I doubt that made it into the PDB. But here's the question: when did it make it into the PDB? You know what I'm saying? I mean, probably not before it became a massive boondoggle boner by the administration. Then all of a sudden we need to know everything about it, and the president needs to be briefed on it. This is so broken, man. It's so broken. It's disheartening. And, I don't know. Let me get this out of the way right now. So I looked up Hanlon's razor. We're always talking about Hanlon's razor on here. Hanlon's razor states, and we're often mangling the quote, but Hanlon's razor is: "Never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity." That's malice and stupidity, but I would say incompetence could be substituted for stupidity. But I will attribute, Roger, a little bit of this to malice, because if what Josh is saying is true, which I agree with, we're shooting all these things down now. For what reason? Everyone's come out and roundly admitted we didn't know what they were. The three things we shot down, we didn't know what they were, but we shot them down anyway, whether they presented a threat or not. And to me, that's a little bit malicious, because all they're doing is demonstrating we are strong. We are strong. And what have we always said, man? Sunlight's the best disinfectant, dude. Just tell us the truth from the very beginning. I would feel about the same now. Do you agree or disagree with my feeling? I would feel about the same now if the administration just came out and said, "We screwed this one up. We're going to make sure it doesn't happen again. We're going to adjust our radars. We're going to do the gobbledygook. We're going to do all this stuff. But yeah, we got this one wrong." I wouldn't be any more or less pissed off and disheartened than I am right now. Just tell me the truth. Tell me the truth. You screw up. I screw up. Everybody screws up. So, I mean, sunlight's the best disinfectant, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. You would actually, and this is, when you talk about trust and incompetence and this and that. I mean, look at his cabinet. Like, who in the president's cabinet actually instills some confidence in you? And I go down the list here. It's definitely not Anthony Blinken. It's definitely not Janet Yellen. It's definitely not Lloyd Austin, Merrick Garland, Deb Haaland. You go down the list: Pete Buttigieg, Jennifer Granholm. Like, none of them established. None of them give me any confidence. And this has been my argument, and I don't know, maybe just you have so many diehards on both sides of the aisle that they just can't do this. But that's always been, one of my go-tos. To me, you would establish trust by saying, "Hey, you know what, guys, gals, we tried this and it didn't work, and we're going to adjust our course. Hey, some balloons went up. We were tracking it. We weren't exactly sure, you know, and of course you do this after it's already been reported, after the citizen found it and reported on it or whatever. Then you have to address it and you say, hey, either we were tracking it and this is what's going on, or you know what, like you said, no, we weren't tracking it. We're not usually used to tracking things this small with that move at this pace. We've, like you said, and I think the Air Force general came out right and said it, that hey, we adjusted our radars, and you know, now we're tracking, you know, things of this nature, yada yada yada. People understand mistakes, and one thing, as an, you know, American people, we are very forgiving. We're very forgiving when they're honest mistakes and people come out and admit to them. Uh, we're not so forgiving when you have to pull it out of somebody and then just continue to lie over and over and over and over again. And I don't know which is worse. I don't know which is worse if, well, I think it might be a combination. Because you talk about incompetence and lying, it's probably both. You know, not only are they incompetent, but they're lying about it. And you can't even tell a good lie. I mean, they could, you know, especially with stuff like that, especially with the first balloon, you could absolutely say, hey, we were tracking this thing from the minute it came off this island. We let it, you know, cover the, you know, the U.S. airspace. We jammed it so it wasn't collecting anything. We wanted to see its capabilities. We shot it down, and now we're going to go get it. Done. Enough said. It's over.
Yep.
And you can say that about the other ones. Or, hey, we took a look at these other, you know, these other balloons that are up there, these other flying objects. They really don't meet our criteria for threat, you know, probably some homegrown stuff, whatever it is. National Weather Service. I mean, I'm pretty sure you have to have like FAA license for anything. I mean, I have to have an FAA license for my, you know, 2-pound drone that flies in my backyard. So I'm assuming like a 60-foot weather balloon. Like, who's the guy? What was his name in LA that had the weather balloon, or the balloons tied to his lawn chair and got up in like up to, what was it, like 25, 30,000 feet. I have to look his name up. I think it was
Oh
Walter.
yeah, I
Walter.
remember that.
Walter. It was like Larry Walter was on the balloon. He actually flew into the pathway of like LAX or something like that and had to go in and tow him down. Here's the other thing. So you talk about the $400,000 missile that we didn't just fire one, we had to fire another one. So it was two. So we can refuel a jet at 35,000 feet flying 300 knots. We don't have any way to like tether this thing and bring it back down. I mean, you know, I'm not positive, you know, I don't know all of our capabilities, and maybe some of it you're just not, it's not worth it, right? But like, surely you have some capability to tether this thing and bring it down, right? I mean, that's just, it's
No,
mind boggling to me, dude.
no, we don't have Larry Walter, lawn chair Larry.
Yeah.
That's right. No,
That was like in the 80s, wasn't it?
no,
Like late 70s, early 80s, something like that.
I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember when it was, but I do remember the story. You're right. You think we would have tethered that thing, you know, brought it down so we could exploit it, you know, reverse engineer, just see, you know, see what's what. Instead, we shot a $20 million missile at it to 1982. Yeah, Roger was right. 1982. Well, Luke's talking about the incompetence, and I think, you know, there is, on full display right now is, you know, another piece of the administration's incompetence in Pete Buttigieg. Is there a more worthless person in this administration
Good
than
Lord.
Pete than Mayor Pete? Like, I mean, this guy is a
Only
complete
if they weren't
disaster.
gay.
You guys,
The only
only
thing
if
that
they
would
weren't
make
gay.
it, yeah.
No, you're right. You're right.
I'm glad you brought him up
It's-
because I actually wrote his name down for this episode because I don't want to cut you off, but it's I think what he doesn't realize is like his own incompetence is burying him in the Democratic Party. Because remember how it was like 2 years ago, right? Mayor Pete, he's the heir apparent to Joe Biden, right? And then you had all of his failures, and I'll kick it back over to you. But when was the last time you've heard his name like being in secession for anything, running for president, being, you know, the next heir apparent? Dude, that dude, his own incompetence has finally buried him, just like Kamala's has buried hers.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, even Nina. Oh man, I can't remember her last name
Turner.
on Twitter. Yeah, dude. Even Nina Turner. I mean, one of the most hard
When
left.
you start agreeing with her,
Yes, dude. There for probably the last like 2 or 3 days. Like I was like, somebody has hijacked her Twitter account because I have agreed with like every tweet she's put out, and I was like, dude, we truly live in bizarro world right now. Like, you know, up is down, down is up. You know, cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria. Because she is, you know, she's dragging Pete Buttigieg over the coals, and you know, Luke typed it. Even Ilhan Omar is dragging Pete Buttigieg over the coals for his incompetence. And a lot of it started with the ports, um, you know, in COVID, and then it's just going on. But like, dude, this latest disaster in East Palestine, Ohio, is absolutely terrible. I mean, this is worse. I think this is worse than 3 Mile Island by far. I mean, I'm sure everybody's tracking the train derailment up there, and on February 3rd, that train derailed, and now they're saying, based on some residential security camera, like a ring camera or something like that, it looks like a wheel bearing went out, which led to the derailment. But have you guys seen some of the photos that have come out of there of literally mushroom clouds, literally seen from space? You can see it from space. There's a sea of white clouds, and then there's this massive black circle, over where East Palestine, Ohio is. And I guess one of the cars, or a couple of the cars, I forget, I don't know how much, but it was carrying vinyl chloride, which is supposedly extremely toxic. So this train derails, and then I haven't really dug into the story yet because I've been preoccupied, but they either intentionally blow it up or it blows up, um, and it has released a lot of toxins into the air. It's released a lot of toxins into the water. And Pete Buttigieg is busy on TV. What's he talking about? He's not talking about that. He's talking about how there's too many white construction workers. And you're like, bro, you haven't been at a construction site near me in a while, I guess, because there's not a whole lot of white dudes on a construction site these days. Not around me anyway. Um, you know, I don't know. Maybe there are if there's unions involved or something. There's another reason, so you can go hate on the unions. But yeah, I don't know, Luke. Have you taken a look at the train derailment and what's going on in East Palestine, Ohio? It's bad, man. Like, it's bad. But the government keeps telling people there's no reason to worry, which is automatically means you should worry.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, looking at it, like, this is going to have some long lasting detrimental effects to not only to that area right in there, but all the tributaries that flow out of there into other major rivers and stuff. It's going to have some pretty long term impacts.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to have to wait too long before we're seeing a bunch of commercials. Were you exposed to this? Call this number. Were you exposed to this and have symptoms of that, this, and that? Call this number, and you're entitled to billions of dollars in damages. Yeah, I have been following it, and hey, D, I want you to listen real close right here because I'm not. I'm actually saying something positive, not negative. So listen real close. So, D, and I want to address this, by the way, with you guys. We're really trying hard not to be black helicopter guys, but I'd like to address it. So, I'm going to imitate D, and she texted us, and she's like, we were talking about the balloons and stuff, and she goes, "What are they trying to distract us from? They're trying to distract us from Ohio." And back then when she said that, I wasn't even tracking that train derailment, and she was. So good on you, D. But yeah, what this is an aside, but what are they trying to distract us from with all this stuff? And I'll get into a glitch in the matrix here in a little while. Roger thinks everything's fine, which he's probably right. But the other night, Josh and I were going down the rabbit hole of maybe Elon Musk is right. This is all a simulation, and the code has reached a point where it needs to be debugged because things just don't seem right, at the current moment. But yeah, Josh, I am tracking it to answer your question. It is truly amazing. I'm not going to question. They said it was a controlled burn of vinyl chloride and a laundry list of other chemicals that just sound bad. And it's like, from a layman's point of view, I'm probably less than a layman on this. I'm like, was the best thing to do really set it on fire? I mean, I'm not going to question the experts because, a lot of times people in the intel, who aren't in the intel field will question a lot of things in the intel field. It's like, bro, you don't know what's going on. You have no idea what you're talking about. But to me, it's just like, bro, whoever decided that we should burn vinyl chloride did they not understand that like burning vinyl chloride creates phosgene gas? Phosgene gas. Phosgene gas was the deadliest chemical weapon used on the battlefields of World War I. And they evacuated a town of what, 5,000 people? You can't, I mean, Palestine or Palestine, however, I think and locals there say it Palestine. So I'll say Palestine. That's a watershed for the Ohio River. Okay, maybe that's why they decided that maybe we should burn this and send it up into the atmosphere where it can be, diffused a little bit instead of letting it seep into the watershed. Because hell, you lived around Maryland, you see watershed signs everywhere, and bitch, you better not throw your Coca-Cola out the window because this is a watershed to the Chesapeake Bay, and you're going to poison fish. It's like, I don't know, was that a good call or not? Uh, boy, from a layman's from a layman's point of view, which is mine, it doesn't seem like it is, but I'm not going to second guess them. But Jesus, releasing phosgene gas again, I don't know how quick that dissipates. Maybe it's not as bad as it seems, but the environmentalists sure are quiet on this. And somebody, I can't remember who I was reading or listening to, made a really good point about. We were saying, well, how many train derailments are there a year? This is when we were talking about, is the matrix glitching out? Roger, quick on the Google machine, the Gurgle machine, quickly pointed out, well, there's 1,700. There were 1,700 last year train derailments. Okay, they don't all look like Palestine, right? There's probably minor train derailments and things like that, but man, 1,700. What were there the year before that? And the year before that, is that the baseline? 1,700. This seems like a lot, but if it is 1,700, well, doesn't that show you, hey, man, the infrastructure? Maybe we should take a look at that a little bit. Joe's plan's not going to touch it. But back to infrastructure, it's like, boy, when we were talking about that pipeline that the Bad Bunny hated so much, transferring chemicals and all that stuff via pipeline under the ground is far, far, far safer than by rail, especially if there's 1,700 derailments a year. So I back to the thing, I think that this is going to have long-term health impacts that aren't even going to be noticed, not truly noticed, until this is far out of the news, 2 years from now. I saw one thing that really spooked me out, and they were talking to this dorky comic book looking dude who raises foxes, or he takes in foxes. Did you guys see that? That was spooky as hell, because foxes are very, very sensitive to chemicals, especially exhaust from cars. And they were doing a story on this guy and his foxes. He's like, man, the foxes are acting weird. Look at this one right here. And he's holding this little fox. And to me, it looks normal because I'm not around foxes a lot. But he's like, take a look at it, compare it to that one. This fox's face was all puffy. They were showing the foxes in their little pens, and they were like pacing back and forth and acting crazy. You could tell that something's up. Oh, it was Tucker Carlson that was covering it. And he's like, hey, they call it a canary in a coal mine for a reason. And if the foxes who are, 20 miles away from that are feeling the effects, and these things just want to get out of there, you can tell they want to run. And, evacuating a town and then tell them they can go back and drink bottled water, I just don't think that's going to cut it. And yeah, man, my heart breaks for those people there, because yeah, your environment is ruined. Your environment is ruined for years to come because of that. And it's like, I'm no environmentalist, you guys know that, but I am a conservationalist. And I do know that that's not right. Setting, vinyl chloride on fire and making it into phosgene gas and poisoning the literal air, and then telling the people 48 hours later, however long it was, that they can go back. Don't worry. When you haven't even tested the water, it's irresponsible. It's broken. It's like, who's the EPA chief? I don't know. Again, I'm still on the glitching out in the matrix thing, and I heard a thing today that said, I think it was Ben Shapiro talking about it. It's like when civilizations are reaching an inflection point, you get a lot of mass confusion. And he listed a few items in history, and I'm like, geez, maybe that's where we are. I'm not calling end of days or anything, but Yeah, a lot of stuff going on, Roger. I mean, a lot of stuff going on. It's not just this, it's not just the balloons, it's just one thing after the other. And, your thoughts on the train derailment, and then your thoughts on, is this a distraction or is it just part of the bigger picture? Is it Ukraine? Is it the balloons? What is it?
It's all a distraction. I mean, the events that are happening are obviously happening. And some of these have happened yearly, annually. The mistakes happen, accidents happen, tragedies happen, unfortunately. We just, the news doesn't report on them, they don't cover it. And when things like this happen, especially what's going on with the administration right now, because guess what we're talking about? We're talking about Palestine, Ohio, and not inflation that was at 6.4% and up a half a point month over month, right? We're not talking about buying oil back for a strategic oil reserve at $80 a barrel versus the $24 a barrel that Donald Trump wanted to buy it back at. We're not talking about what's going on in Ukraine. We're not talking about the Michigan State shooter, right? It's to change the narrative, right? You change the channel, you go to something else. And it's easy for them to go to Palestine, Ohio, because it doesn't involve directly anybody from the administration. Now, Buttigieg should have gone out there and obviously directly talked about it. He didn't. But the blame is lying on, I think it was Norfolk Southern or whatever the heck it is, and the Ohio EPA. So here's what's killing me. And I'll take this one piece right here. This is what bothers me, and this kind of dovetails under what you're saying. And I will steal a little bit of, I think it was Tucker Carlson that said, it was either him or Waters. I don't trust any of them, because these same people that are telling you for the last 3 years that you had to wear a mask to go hug grandma for a virus that I had a 99.98% chance of surviving or just getting sniffles, which I had and recovered, are the same ones telling you that, yeah, the mushroom cloud you saw in Palestine, Ohio, it's good. You're good to go home. They had, and I watched several interviews with the Ohio EPA. Her name is, I don't know if she is like the chief or what. I know she represents Ohio EPA, Tiffany Kavalek. And there was a guy who was, I think he was a formula chemist. And his whole response to this thing was, they're volatile organic compounds. Okay. Volatile organic compounds. And he tried to make the comparison that it is no different than when you go pump gas at the gas station. The fumes that you get, it's in the same category, so you're fine. So I'm guessing, well, one, I think huffing can kill you, right? Last that I heard, or cause some brain damage. And so, do you think the concentration of the volatile organic compound that you get when you go pump gas at your Costco or Shell station, you think that's like similar to the mushroom cloud that Josh was talking about in Palestine, Ohio? It's apples and oranges, right? We're not talking about like some residual stuff. Hey, man, I had a bale of hay and some hay blew off on the interstate. Well, okay, you know what blew off on the interstate? You live in the state of Arizona. Chances are, if you're in Yuma, it's probably not going to impact you as one bale of hay. A mushroom cloud that covers, like 6 miles of the sky, yeah, that's probably going to have a little bit more of an impact. I mean, it just does. You see that and you hear that, and I'm like, I can't even believe what I'm hearing. I mean, because now you're just outright lying to me. I mean, in no no man's world, no woman's world does that even make sense. It doesn't pass a common sense test. And I tell you, I posted this on the Twitter today that you would Tiffany Kavalek, or however you pronounce her name, if she is so sure, okay, and she should pull a Mayor Adams. She should pull a Mayor Adams. If she is so sure that it's safe out there, she should go to Palestine, Ohio, and she should camp out there for 2 weeks and live off local water and local food. You are so sure that it is that safe that her and her cabinet, if she is in fact the chief, she may not be representative, whatever, but 10 members from that office, they are so certain, and it's a Republican state. Okay. I think DeWine is is he the senator or governor? Anyway, it's a Republican state generally. So, we're not picking left, right, or whatever, but these folks, like, hey, if you're so sure it's that safe and you're telling people to go home, and you see people, I've seen the interviews. So, I get it. Some of it's like anecdotal and this and that, but you're starting to see people like, hey, man, like, there's dead fish all over the place here. My animals are dying. My animals are sick. I'm smelling something funky, and unfortunately, a lot of these folks don't have the resources to go somewhere else and ride it out for 6 months Hey, you say just move. You think you're going to be able to sell your house there anytime in the near future? Right? Yeah, we got some beachfront property for you in Chernobyl too, right? Or 3 Mile. Hey, I hear 3 Mile Island has plenty of beach for you to go hang out on, right? They're not able to go anywhere. And to sit here and watch these and listen to these administrators tell you it's fine, Luke's, spot on. It's going to be 8 months. Hey, did you live within, 100 miles radius of Palestine, Ohio back during the train incident? And I think with this stuff here, they had it. They were talking about one of the folks that were interviewing on Fox News. This is stuff, man, I think it's going to come out for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. But hey, where are all the environmentalists? What about global warming or climate change or any of that stuff? Because it's a distraction, right? Because it's not something that can be blamed on the administration. And like Josh just texted, hey, Michigan State shooting out of the news already. Hey, it didn't fit their narrative of the assault weapons ban, right? Because it was a pistol. Oh, and by the way, the guy already had a gun charge, and it was a felony offense for him to even own a gun. So again, we're not talking about something random here. And I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but it pisses me off because they sit here when you defund the police, and we're talking about police and first responders and all this stuff. You sit here, you poop on them, you crush their reputations, you defund them, you're pulling resources away. Now, I don't know about this specific incident, but the problem is you pull those resources away, they can't dedicate it to folks who, hey, should be arrested, should be behind bars. You've got cash free bail. You want to weaken the gun laws out there, or you want to just weaken criminal laws. Well, they want to weaken every law except for the gun law. But even that, they let him go. They let him go. They let him out. He did like a year. He gets another weapon, and then they wonder, he goes out and he shoots some stuff up. Again, another crime, blows his own head off. And you're like, man, how could this have happened? Like, seriously? They look at everything as an isolated incident. And that's not the case. There is a holistic approach to this. And it goes back to the administration where, hey, your policies are not working. Period. And I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you're a Republican. I know what I pay. Going back to talking about the State of the Union address, that was the big problem that I think they had. And even, dude, the news today did you guys even hear anything about inflation? It was a blip.
Yeah, that's a bad
Right?
one.
It was a blip.
Yeah.
And that was part of the problem that we talked about before, is that people have now become so desensitized to it that it's just, hey man, remember it was berries. This is the new normal, man. 1.2% GDP is the new normal. That's just the way it is. And then Donald Trump came in, like him, love him, hate him, whatever. Hey, that wasn't the new normal. Okay. It did improve. Wages did improve. Prices did go down. Inflation was in check. And now with this administration, they're so far down this path, but you've got folks, and we did a whole episode about his entire cabinet. Like, this is a train wreck going into it. And I should pardon the pun, obviously, but it was a nightmare going into it. We did a complete episode on his cabinet. Like, hey, I'm telling you right now, I can look through history, recent past performance, and tell you that nothing good comes out of this. But most of the American people don't care. And you have incidents like this that are a distraction. It actually pisses me off, Josh. It truly pisses me off because, going back to what Luke said with the Ohio officials, hey man, I just challenge them. I challenge them. Pack a tent, pack your go bag, go spend 2 weeks out there, go camp along the Ohio River. I tell you what, go eat what you catch, go drink what you pull out of that river. And when you do that for 2 weeks, then I'll believe you.
Yeah, well, they're not going to do that, right? Anybody who hasn't seen the the episode, the series, mini series on Chernobyl, I believe it was Netflix that did it. It really needs to watch it. Luke brought it up a long time ago. On which one? HBO. HBO. Yeah. Luke brought it up and talked about it a long time ago. I went and watched it. It's fantastic. But it's exactly what is happening now. There's a disaster. Just an unmitigated disaster of epic proportions. And the entire time, people are like, man, I don't know about this. And the entire time the government's like, no, it's fine. It's safe. It's okay. Right. And until it finally got so big and got so bad that they couldn't hide it anymore. First, they tried to hide it from their people. Then they tried to hide it from the world. And it was just, they couldn't any longer. Um, it, we've talked about this numerous times. I don't want to be a black helicopter guy. Like, I really don't. But man, the government makes it really hard. Man, they make it really, really hard when you have everything that's going on right now. And I'm going to add on. Have you guys seen the Google pre-bunking articles that have come out, especially about what they're doing in Europe right now? So Google, you guys can look it up while I'm talking about it. So Google is now going to make an effort to start pushing. They're calling it pre-bunking, and it's quote to educate people about online misinformation, right, and how to spot it and how to do this. And you're like, that's that sounds kind of ominous, right? We're pre-bunking things, but it's very benign because no, we're just going to show you how to spot misinformation. Not we're not going to go ahead and actually talk about things that are already out there. It again, it seems benign, on the surface, but it seems sinister, once you really start thinking about it and how they're going to do that, and the ways that they could do that to influence people. Michigan State shooting already out of the news. What Roger laid out. He was already a felon, shouldn't have owned a gun, and he was a wrong skin tone, and he didn't use an AR. If you go back, take a look at food plant fires in 2022, and then the couple that have happened in 2023, and it's not isolated to an area. Much like people attacking substations, electrical substations, it's happened in North Carolina and Washington State and one others. But you go back in 2022, food plant facilities, and this is whether there was food stored there, it was a fertilizer plant, or it was actually like a food manufacturing facility, like a Tyson's chicken, or something, or a chicken farm. uh, and we're talking about in Illinois, Louisiana, Washington, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Vermont, Oregon, Arkansas, Pennsylvania, Maine, Arizona, Texas, New Hampshire, Idaho, California, just to name a few. Literally has been, right. All these fires are starting, and they're telling you, like, no, there's no concerted effort. This is not something more sinister. This is just coincidence. That's what the government's telling us. And if the government had a track record that was impeccable and their integrity was beyond reproach, then maybe I'd be inclined to believe them. But based on the fact that the government has lied year over year, just like inflation has, risen year over year, it's hard to believe them. It's hard to believe what they say, anything they say. The government can come out and tell me today water is wet, and I'm going to have to go check that. Like, I'm like, well, you know what? I don't know. I'm going to have to go research the research on that because I just don't believe anything you tell me. I don't, and that's really not. It's not good. It is not good when the American populace, writ large, starts questioning the, what they're being told and stuff. I mean, it is good in a way, but man, this is not where we need to be. Not right now, especially when we're divided and as we have been. Um, I don't know what needs to happen. I don't know, at what level it needs to happen at to kind of hit the reset button. If there is a reset button, if there is anything to reset. Unfortunately, I think it's going to take a 9/11 type event, and even then, I don't know if that would do it, because there's just so much going on that just doesn't make sense. There's no sense to it, and there doesn't seem to be anyone in charge that is like, hey, yep, a lot of craziness going on right now, but there's a steady hand at the wheel, and we have it. It's going to be okay. We're taking care of business. There's nobody doing that right now, and it should be the government, but it's not, and so it's very worrisome. We're I don't know, Luke. I think I think the near future is fraught with peril, and we're in some treacherous waters right now. So
Yeah, it doesn't seem
that's
to
my thoughts on is there a glitch in the matrix?
doesn't seem to be a lot of good news out here. But Roger, I saw your hand up a second ago. What'd you got?
I was actually going to joke with Josh when he said he didn't want to believe what the government was putting out there. It's like, hey, well, you know what? Google's got this new thing called pre-bunking where they're going to release videos, short videos, that's going to show you how to debunk info. And I guarantee these short videos, right? It's supposed to be on YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. TikTok, go imagine that. And they're going to do this in India as well. And I guarantee what's going to be hyperlinked in there is like www.cdc.org,
Damn.
www.whitehouse.gov,
So
right? That's going to be their pre-bunking.
okay. So here's another little glitch in the matrix that's going on. It's like all this weird stuff is happening. It's like D, who I constantly make fun of, obviously in these podcasts, just texted our little group and said we just had a meteor hit one of our little towns down here. She lives in the Rio Grande Valley, and it's like, what the hell is going on? Man, that kind of broke my train of thought a little bit. So we got the world is breaking up when Josh, aka Klaus Schwab, is talking about the Great Reset on C3. But no, I get you, Josh. I understand what you're saying. So Roger, I heard something interesting about inflation today, and it hadn't occurred to me. And you tell me if you tell me if this is totally off base. I mean, inflation. Boy, I mean, we've been talking about it for a long time. We're going to stop beating that dead horse. That horse has been dead for a long time. That we called this a long time ago, right? But the inflation numbers were released in what was it, 6.4 north south, 6.4 year
Yeah,
over year.
6.4.
Okay,
Yep.
so 6.4 year over year. Now, what does that actually mean? That means it's 6.4 more than it was in January of 2022. So, what that means is that it's compounded on the 7.2 or whatever it was in January 2022. I think a lot of people don't realize that. And the way the White House is trying to sell it is, oh, no, it's better. See, because it was 7.2 in 2022 and it's only 6.4 now. No, that's 13.6 since the year before that. That is, when I put it into that context, I'm like, hell, I wasn't even thinking about that, because they've even got me thinking, oh, well, at least it's not as high as last time. No, wrong. No,
Year over year.
it's year over year. And it's like,
And it's even worse with this one because what the game that the administration was playing was they were trying to play month to month inflation. Okay. So, hey, inflation didn't go up from November to December. Okay. It was still up year over year, but it didn't go up from November to December. Well, that actually went up half a point too. And oh, by the way, if you take that 0.5, you multiply it through the year, guess what? You're at an annual rate of 6%. And like you said, when you look at it year over the course of the last 2 years, you're at 13 some odd percent. And here's the other thing. Here's the other thing that people don't realize, right? Here's what's really going to blow your mind. You know what inflation does not include?
yep,
Energy and food prices, because
that's
energy
right.
and food tends to be extremely volatile. It's not a fair indicator, right, to throw that in there because it can really skew the numbers month to month. But we have had high food and fuel prices for the entire 2 years that it's higher than the 13%.
Yeah. And this is what scares me. Excuse me. This is what scares me about the whole thing is that, not scares me, but it's something to keep in mind, is that, you'll notice things every now and then at the grocery store that will go down in price, and it'll go down significantly over a short amount of time. And believe it or not, what I noticed over the past week, at least where I live, it's probably not the same everywhere else, so this is purely anecdotal, is the price of actual chicken has gone down. Has gone down to what I would consider now to be a reasonable level. What if I walked into the store 2 years ago and saw chicken at that price, I'd be like, oh, whoa, what's happened? But now it's become baseline. So now that it dropped, down to $1 or down $1, it's like, oh, that's good. And that's what alarms me about this whole. But yet, egg prices are still up, which it's like, okay, well, I understand there's a difference between chicken farms and egg farms. I get that, but what bothers me is how quickly prices could come down from the baseline of what we're used to now, and then the administration taking all the credit for that.
Absolutely.
They've taken credit for the gas prices coming down so much. They're down so much from where they were last year. It's like, poof, well, they ain't down that much. You know what I'm saying? I mean, because our baseline has now been established. And that's one of the things I was thinking while I was driving today was like, boy, when year over year, since January 2021, basically you're paying 13.6% more for, the CPI, core price index or consumer.
CPI, consumer.
It's consumer. Okay. So it's consumer price index. You're paying 13.6 more. That's not including food and oil or petroleum products. I mean, good grief. That's the baseline now. So if we go down 6% lower, it's going to seem like we're paying a lot less, but it's never going to get back down to what it was in 2021. And the administration, I think it was KJP that was saying, well, you got to look at it's proving a negative. She's like, well, wages have gone down, right? That's another thing that the report showed is wages have actually are starting to wane a little bit. They're starting to go down. Even though unemployment is quote unquote low, wages are shrinking. She's like, well, that's proof that it's working. That's proof that Joe Biden's plan is working. It's like, well, wait. But if wages went up, you would also say that's proof that Joe Biden's plan is working. So that it's a false positive. It's not logical. We're not in a good place economically, Roger. I mean, I do think we'll come out of it, but I think we said 2 episodes ago, 109, that just leave it the hell alone and let it heal itself instead of injecting, $1 trillion into the economy with this Inflation Reduction Act, which is really a green energy plan. But I don't know. I mean, I just found that fascinating with the inflation. And, Roger, we've got the debt ceiling fight coming up too, which we're calling it now. Was that happen this late this spring, early summer?
Yeah, they're saying Janet Yellen is saying between July and September.
Janet Yellen, F her. But, okay, so the debt ceiling's got to be increased. And just give the audience a quick rundown if they don't know what happens if it's not increased and we default on the debt.
So we basically, and we already had one, so we have a bond status, right? And basically it's just like anything else that you go out there, your credit card, your credit rating or whatever. It's how much risk is involved. Like, do you really want to throw all your retirement money into the Bank of Nigeria? Okay. Or, some other, a Cuba or a Russia or something like that, because you could lose money. It's very volatile, right? And so the US has been one of the safest places to invest money. And we're talking about government to government, country to country, that type of stuff. And what happens is, you got to remember, and I don't even know the number off the top of my head, how many billions, hundreds of billions of dollars just interest, but you have a national debt limit that's set by Congress that you can't go over this amount. So it's money that's already been spent. Imagine that. But obviously, as interest goes, it compounds on that, and the deficit isn't going down. The deficit is still increasing. Well, you have to increase that debt limit. It's no different than your credit card payment, right? You have a credit card limit of $1,000. You're making the bare minimum payment, but your interest with that continues to take it over your limit. So now you need $1,050.
Right. But you're still using the credit card on a daily basis.
But you're still using the credit card, right? So that's been the argument between the left and the right. And again, the right being the conservatives, the GOP Republicans, they are no fiscal conservatives. Okay. Fiscal conservatism has been dead for many, many, many years. But that is one, when you specifically with the Freedom Caucus, it's like, okay, hey, we can have the conversation about raising the debt limit, but we need to fix the deficit. So, hey, if you can come up with a balanced budget, understanding we need to pay our bills and interest is going to be there, then okay, let's raise the debt limit so we can cover, our liabilities and cover the payments that we're supposed to make, but let's not spend any more money. because the federal government just operates on a totally different wavelength than what the common person does. But even that's changing with all their laws, right? They want to, or regulations. They want to come up with regulations with, hey, no more late fees. Airlines that charge the same price with every for every seat, no matter more leg room, less. What ends up happening is all those fees get spread out among everybody, and everybody will pay more. And at the end of the day, what it comes down to is fiscal and personal responsibility. Okay. The government, you have to elect folks that are going to be fiscally responsible. Republicans haven't done it. Democrats haven't done it. But as individuals, though we can't control everybody who's elected to Congress and this and that, you do have some control over your own personal finances, and you just have to be fiscally responsible. And I think a lot of our listeners are, and it's tough because no matter how much you plan, you still have to plan for the screw ups of the administration. Because we talked about inflation. Hey, you know what? We didn't remove uh, energy and foods removed from the inflation from the CPI. Do you know how high? Do you know how much inflation counting food and fuel? 40 some odd percent. I think it's like 44 and 46% respectively. Increase. Okay. Now, the administration likes to brag about wages. Wages have gone up. Okay. So wages go up 10%. Inflation is up 13%. Food and fuel up 40 some odd percent. So how much of a pay cut did you really take? And I'll tell you right now, the only thing keeping this economy afloat is the job market, which, it's a double-edged sword, because the hot job market, the hot labor market, is also the reason why interest rates are going up. The reason why the job market is so hot is because inflation is high. And the people that were able to sit at home, and live off a $1,200 check can no longer do that, because that $1,200 no longer buys $1,200 worth of goods and services. That $1,200 now only buys, $800 worth of goods and services. So now a lot of those folks are forced to come back into the job market, and that's why the labor market's so hot. And that really is, we've talked about this over the last year, that really is the last pillar that's keeping this whole thing up. Is the unemployment number. The unemployment number is historically low. The labor market is extremely hot. Wages are up. I'm seeing it in the sector that we work in now. But once that tent pole falls, and it will fall, you know what? That's when you start to get the economy crashing. Because now you're talking about multiple sectors. You're already seeing interest rates up, inflation's up, energy's up, right? Food prices are up. Housing prices are up. I mean, mortgage rates now, thank God we all bought our houses when we did. I feel sorry for folks that are buying houses now. I mean, what's the mortgage rate now? Like 7.5%, give or take. It's over double what it was back in our day when we purchased. So, the sad thing about it is they spin it and people buy it and people want to believe it. And it goes back to the State of the Union. I think more and more, you talk about not wanting to be a black helicopter guy, and it's so hard not to be. One, we called Nord Stream. I'm just saying. I'm letting you know we called Nord Stream out the day it happened, right? What did we say? I mean, you go check that out.
We need to talk about that too.
Yeah, and all of a sudden C3 is not so crazy. You know what? But you can't tell me, and I'm not talking about midterms, because midterms are what they are. Local, we've talked about that before, whatever. You can't tell me that, what's Biden's approval rating now? Like 42%, something like that, 41%, whatever it is. Who were the 40%? Like, seriously, you cannot tell me that dude's got a 40 some odd percent approval rating. You will never convince me. And I'm not talking about cheating, I'm just talking about, just look at where we're at. Look at the policies out there. You can't tell me he got 81 million votes. There's no way this guy should be electable in 2024 if he makes it, which I still don't think he will. There's just no way. I mean, when you look at this stuff and blame the GOP because they botched the midterms. I mean, numbers weren't in their favor, but they botched the midterms regardless. And no, it's okay that we fixed it, because we just reelected the same people that, lost, the last election. So we'll bring them back, because surely they'll win the next one. Dude, it's incredible, because it's gone beyond gaslighting now. It's to the point where it's just straight out lying. Like, it doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter what reality is. It doesn't matter what you feel. I'm going to tell you what's going on, and that's reality. And then, oh, by the way, Google's going to help with pre-bunking and go ahead and give us some links back to whitehouse.gov and back to CDC and back to FDA and USDA and any other organization you want, treasury.gov. And it's going to tell you that, you know what? It's really not that bad. What was the Wall Street Journal article today that came out saying, hey, you know what? You're really kind of hurt for money. Maybe you should skip breakfast. Like, seriously? Like that, that's where we're at. Hey, guess what? Not only will you save money because you're not buying $6 a dozen eggs, but Josh, guess what? You will lose weight. You will lose weight because you will cut out 33% of your caloric intake a day by skipping first breakfast. Dude, it's incredible to me.
It's a clown world, and to close out the Palestine story on here. 11 days. I texted you guys the actual CDC article. 11 days prior to the train derailment, the CDC updated the toxicological profile for vinyl chloride.
No.
I mean, look,
dude. I love you. Send us a 293-page report. And say, hey, check this out.
Put it on the blog. Put it on the website.
Is that right?
I mean,
that's got to be fake news.
Bro,
that's crazy, man.
Look at the article and then look at the date, January 2023. If you go to the CDC's website, it's 11 days prior to the train derailment. They updated the profile for vinyl chloride. I'm telling you, guys, I don't know. Maybe I'll be the Alex Jones of C3. I don't know. But I'm telling you, it's not, this shit is not coincidence anymore. A lot of this stuff, I'm telling you, it's not coincidence. I don't have, I might not have all the evidence to be able to prove it, but there's no way that this, like, there is a glitch in the matrix. Elon Musk is right. Like this is bizarre. Now, as far as the debt ceiling goes, we've gone back and forth on this show, and I'd have to go back and check the game tape. And there's multiple game tapes on it. Does our debt matter? Do we raise the debt ceiling? If we're going to raise the debt ceiling,
it should matter, but it doesn't.
Well, if we're going to raise the debt ceiling, and if we're going to say, well, when we get to that ceiling again, and we don't have any other choice, and we're just going to raise it again, why not just abolish it? Why not just abolish the debt ceiling, and we just continue to borrow? We just continue to borrow and spend, right? After that point, does the debt really matter? I don't know. It's hard to be. I'm not an economist, but what I do know is that if you spend more than you take in, you're always going to be in the red. How do I know that? Because I passed first grade math. And that's just, it's like, oh, I don't have enough apples. I got to borrow an apple from Johnny Wright and carry the one over here and stuff. Like, if we're just going to keep raising the debt ceiling, then just eliminate the debt ceiling. And we can just have as much debt as we need to. Me personally, I say don't raise the debt ceiling. Yes, that obviously has some significant impacts, right? When we don't, we don't raise the debt ceiling, and we hit that the Treasury bonds, and that's that. It's probably going to trigger a fairly deep recession. When the interest isn't being paid on bonds and everything, but at the end of the day, it's one of the. I go back to 2008 when W and the rest of the government decided they were going to bail out the banks. It was like, okay, well, what if you didn't bail out the banks? What would have happened? We would have probably had it would have been a deep recession, deeper than it was, right? And even as it was, it really hurt. But we would have come out stronger on the other end.
Yep.
If we would have just went ahead and suffered for a little while. And we've kind of talked, we talk about this a lot. The American people aren't willing to do that. They're not willing to do that. We could crash China's economy in 6 months if the American people were willing to, to live a little, austere. What's up, Luke?
Well, do you think it's a matter of? I agree with you, and you guys have turned me around. Most Americans are wussies. I get it, but is it more of a matter of Americans don't want to deal with it, or the politicians know that if the Americans have to deal with it, they will not vote for them again? The political fallout would be much too high for them to have to deal with it. Because I do believe, I mean, human beings, really, it's not just Americans. We're not genetically superior to, well, maybe we are, but human beings, for the most part, can deal with adversity very well. It's what we were evolved to do, is deal and adapt to diversity or of adversity. I mean, we adapt to every climate on the planet. We adapt to every single different type of anything that's thrown at us. Man, there were jaguars and there were saber-toothed tigers back in the day. We dealt with that. We're still here. But like you said, I mean, if we would have bit the bullet right now, because that disaster in 2007, 2008, I'm going to kick it back to you. I'm not on a diatribe here. I'm just kick it back to you. But take these points and give me your thoughts. The disaster was bad, man. It was bad, real bad, because everything was invested in those, subprime. Not everything, but the subprime was part of what everything was invested in. Everybody was betting on it and betting on that bet and betting on another one, and the synthetic CDOs, collateralized debt obligations. It was bad. Everything should have fallen apart, but it didn't. We propped it up because it's like, well, we can't have Americans suffering for 12 to 15 years, because I'm telling you, if they would have just let that play out, I'm with you 100%. They should have let it play out. People should have been stuck. They should have been pissed. They should have been like, somebody has really screwed up and somebody's going to need to burn or hang for this. The system might have changed and we would just now be coming out of it. But to your point, I mean, seriously, it's 2023. We would just now be coming out of it. And, people would be kind of getting along with their lives again. And kids nowadays, they'd be the depression kids, and they would be as tough as our grandparents. I agree that's what they needed. But back to my original thing, do you think that Americans don't want to deal with it? And they don't. I don't want to deal with it. Or do you think it's the politicians, the people at the levers of power, who are like, no, we need to stay in power and we can't have people suffering too long? I mean, do you understand what I'm asking? I mean, make it clear there.
Yeah, yeah. No, I completely understand what you're asking, and the answer is both. The answer is the American people don't want to deal with it. They don't want to tolerate it, and politicians damn sure don't want anything that is going to jeopardize their next campaign. Right? That they're going to be, they're going to be held to the fire. That's why a number of politicians, continue to straddle the fence on, a lot of the issues that we care about, because they don't want to take a stance. You know, and again, I think I and I'll, I would not want to deal with that personally. Like I like my creature comforts. I like being able to set my thermostat, at 68 degrees or 70 degrees, right, during the summer. I like being able to, I like my heat. I like I like to be able to go out to eat when I want to. You know, I enjoy all those things too. But, you know, I look at it and yeah, our kids would have been the depression kids and it would have hurt them. But like you said, man, they would have been tough. They would have been a lot tougher. And I don't know that we would have had this wokeness that we had, because people really wouldn't have cared about anybody's pronouns. It would have been like, hey, man, I'm trying to figure out where my next meal is coming from. I don't have time to worry about your feelings or, your truth, as these clowns call it. Why? Because I'm getting on a train and I'm headed west, to go find some work. Uh, so I think we would have been a lot better. And I think, I think now is the time we either raise the debt ceiling, don't raise the debt ceiling, or abolish it. If we're going to raise it, just abolish it, because then it doesn't mean anything. Right. And and Roger's right. We have to fix the spending, and that has to be, it's not going to pass, but it has to be, it has to be there. We have to have a balanced budget. Social Security and Medicaid, those are two of the biggest drivers of debt. We have to fix those. They have to be reformed. I was I was adamant. I was, like, hey, this is not right. When they looked at the military retirement, all right, you do 20 years, you get 50%. Right? They had to come back in, and eventually they looked. They were like, hey, like, we can't sustain that retirement plan, in the foreseeable future. It's not sustainable. So we have to redo it, reform it, revamp it, and they did with the blended retirement system for the military, which, again, hey, you're grandfathered in. This is for people who are just joining, right? So you don't have to worry about it. And we have to do the same thing for Social Security, Medicaid. Hey, it's not going to affect the people on it right now. It's not going to affect, maybe it doesn't affect the people who have, spent the last, X number of years paying into it. But hey, guess what? If you, come this date, if you are not paying into it, this is your new plan, right? Um, because the way it is now, we're paying money right now. You and I, the three of us, are paying money that they're using to pay our parents and our grandparents, right? And they're hoping that there's going to be money in it when we get to that age for them to be able to pay us. Now, I think they arrested Bernie Madoff for this very thing, right? It's somewhat of a Ponzi scheme, but it's legal because they do it, right? It's illegal when you do it with somebody else's money.
Let me let me say this though. I mean, the figures I've looked at, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's not us. I get you, Ponzi scheme, and I'm not saying you're wrong. You're right. That's exactly what it is. But we're playing with money now that if the last time I read it, it was probably 5-6 years ago. We're playing with money now to pay our parents, people in their 70s and approaching 80s, based on our C3 and the listeners, based on if you're in our age demographic, our grandkids are paying that. It all goes back to that debt. Oh, we're going to pay it back someday, right? Someday, someday, someday. The system's been insolvent for quite some time. And it's like, here's the scary part, Josh, and then you kick it to Roger because I've talked too much. So here's the scary part is when you start looking at birth rates, right? What happens when the birth rate starts to invert? As it has, because you had the boomers, and now basically the younger generation, the workers, are paying for their benefits, which I don't really have a problem with. It should be the way it was set up was, well, you pay into the system and you will eventually get your money back because it's been invested the right way, and government-backed securities and all that kind of stuff. But what the bottom line is you've got a smaller population now paying for a larger population's benefits. And from what I'm seeing now, Roger and I discussed it a little bit last week, was or is we're seeing a much lower birth rate and many more kids who are in their 20s now saying, well, we're just never going to have kids. And if we do, we might have one, but that's someday. So the population gets even thinner. The workers get even thinner to pay our benefits. So that's not a rosy picture either, right?
No, not at all. And that's a great point to bring up. We talked about China's declining birth rate, and a lot of that attributed to their one child policy, but we have it as well. So I mean, between 2007 and 2020, the birth rate in the United States declined from 2.12 to 1.64. Right? That's significant. And part of it is due, like you said, people are choosing to have kids later in life, or they're choosing not to have kids at all. People are choosing to you know uh, you know not have kids for silly reasons. We just had you just had Chelsea Handler, that low rent, bottom of my shoe, piece of garbage, come out and talk about how awesome it was, that she didn't have kids. It's like, well, you could have had kids, but you murdered three of them, before they were born.
Did you see?
Because
Did you see what she put on? Did you see it?
I saw a very brief clip. I didn't
You should
see
go
like
watch
what
it.
she had on.
You should go watch it because it's one of the saddest things you'll ever see. I mean, it is sad. It's so sad. It's like it almost seems like satire, but it's like, oh my God, she's serious and she's pathetic. It's horrible.
She's truly a garbage human being, and the world would just simply be better off without her. But she's like, "Oh, I don't have kids. I've never had kids." Well, you did, but you murdered them. So, you know, the birth rate is declining. We do have an issue, and Elon Musk is, he's tweeted about this a few times, and people need to pay attention to those alarm bells. The U.S. government has to get the spending under control. It has to happen. They can't continue to spend more than they take in, and Biden getting ready to raise taxes. Now he says nobody making less than 400K is going to pay quote a penny more in taxes, and we all know that's a lie. We all know that's a lie. Most of us it's tax season right now. Most of us are doing our taxes. We got our, we did our taxes, last week, and we got our tax bill, and I was pretty irate. I'm still pretty. My ass is still pretty chapped over it.
You broke
And
your
I'll tell
drinking
you,
during the week rule.
dude, it was like I was super. I was big sad and big mad all at the same time. Um, and I'll tell you right now, if you're listening to this and you do your taxes on a 1040 EZ, I better not hear you say shit about people paying their fair share. All right, leave it at that. But you can't continue the taxation at the rate they're taxing, and at the rate they're spending. You just can't do it because eventually the debt will outgrow the GDP, and what we can really absorb as a nation. And at some point, the debt has to be dealt with. We may not have to deal with it. Shit, our kids may not have to deal with it, but our grandkids or their kids are going to have to deal with it. And I think they're going to have to deal with it in the form, like our grandparents had to deal with, our great grandparents may have had to deal with, when you're talking about living through a depression. And it's going to be a depression that'll rival, that, of the Dust Bowl, and breadlines. So I don't know. I'm a fan of not raising the debt limit, but if you're going to raise the debt limit, just abolish it because then it really doesn't matter. And with that, I'll turn it over to Luke.
Real quick, Roger. So, how would you feel yesterday or the day before if you were the executive producer of a film that was, I wouldn't say it was panned, but it wasn't very profitable? It was a film called White Noise about a train derailment. It's a film that came out like how long ago? 3 years ago? It's called White Noise, and it's about a train derailment in Palestine, Ohio. How would you feel if you're that producer and you're seeing your residuals off of Netflix or wherever it's on? You're like, how did I become rich overnight? What happened?
Shut up. Are you serious?
Oh, yeah. I thought you were the one that told us about the movie White Noise. Oh,
No.
no, there's a...
Was it the same city, though? I know it was Ohio. Was it the same city?
Well, it might not have been the same city, but it's basically what happened.
Yeah.
How would you feel? I mean, yeah, it's the Matrix, bro. It's
like the
apart.
Cryptocurrency commercial where I woke up, I'm a millionaire. No, I'm not. I'm a millionaire.
Done. I'm done. I'm the new Alex Jones of C3 based off that right there. White Noise.
Look it up.
Yeah, unbelievable. Just don't get us sued. So we got about 25 minutes or so here. I want to change the subject, and I'm going to throw this topic out there. So I'm kind of curious both y'all's takes on this thing. So we started a new series on, I think it was Paramount Plus or something like that. So have you guys seen Mayor of Kingstown? Are you guys watching that? Nod.
I'm not. No.
Okay.
No, I heard it was really good, but I haven't started watching it yet. But that was like a month or two ago. I heard it was really good. So
you need to start watching it. It is fantastic. It's been on our list. We just haven't done it because we got a lot of other shows that we watch or whatever. And we're like, finally, all of a sudden now you've got these mid-season breaks because of the Super Bowl and whatever else. And there wasn't a whole lot on. None of our recorded shows were coming back on for another couple of weeks. So it's like, hey, now's a good time to start this thing. We watch it. First night, we watched like 3 episodes. We're just binge watching now, and they're like 55-minute episodes a piece, which, by the way, Paramount Plus really pisses me off because you have to pay for it and you still get commercials. So if I'm paying for it, why am I still getting commercials? But that's neither here nor there. You need to watch the series first of all. But what it's about a prison town, okay? And I'm not going to spoil anything for you, so go watch it. it picks up from episode 1. It's fantastic. But I want to talk about prison reform because as I watch that, and I used to live in a small town, Lansing, Kansas. Another, that's where Mike Vick did some time out at the Fed pen, and they've got same thing. They've got 5 or 6 pens right there, all within a couple square miles of each other. And I know this is a generality because we're not really prepared to do a deep dive, but like how many prisoners? Somebody Gurgle, how many prisoners do we have in the U.S. right now? I mean, it's got to
Oh
be how
my
many
God.
hundreds of thousands of prisoners, right? So across the country, you have X amount of prisoners, tens of thousands or whatever that number is. There has to be a better use for them. Okay. And I'm not trying to be mean about it or anything, but basically, you have these folks, men and women, that stay in federal and state facilities that are given 3 square meals a day with zero, well, I shouldn't say zero, very little contribution back to society. I'll throw it over to Josh to kind of get his opinion on it. But no, what's up, Luke? How many?
Okay, so this is Department of Justice Ministry response. So this is World Prison Brief. Prison population total, and this has got to be an estimate, right? There's no way because people are coming in and out constantly. And this is a great
Sure.
topic. I'm glad you brought it up. But prison population total, including pretrial detainees and remand prisoners, is 1,675,400. Okay, and there is no way I'd say that's on the low end, but there's your number.
So 1.5 million. That's actually incredible. It's more than what I thought. So you've got 1.5 million people out there. Go ahead.
But the official capacity, is 2.1 million. So let's talk
Wow.
prison reform.
Yeah, it's getting, well, I mean, you can't let them out, right? Because Kamala says if you let them out, then where am I going to get my cafeteria labor from? But along those lines, isn't there something that the inmates can do to give back to society? Back in the day, and again, unions got involved in this and that, but, surely they can, especially local communities, right? Whether it's picking up trash, and in Kansas, we see that all the time. Like in Lansing, dude, they're out there cutting the grass around the elementary schools and that type of stuff and picking up trash or whatever. But whether it be construction, and I'm not saying, I get that out of the 1.6 million, 1.6 million aren't able to work. And yeah, there's going to be a percentage. I get all that. But I am certain there's a significant number, probably at 1 million, that can give back and be of some benefit to the community that they're there, because otherwise they're getting 3 hots in a cot. A lot of them get an education while they're there. And then, some of them do drugs and whatever else and whatever else goes on with prison. But isn't there some way, as opposed to just letting them sit there and be dead weight, that we can, not integrate's the wrong term, but have something for them that they work within the local community, whatever it be, to, hey, go build a school. Hey, you got a homeless population here in Phoenix. You should be responsible. You're going to be on a construction team. You're going to help build houses, right? Or apartment complexes or something like that. That way, when you go to prison for 20 years or 10 years or 15 years or 5 years, no matter how long it is, you're not just sitting there sucking up every taxpayer dollar for your benefit, but hey, you're actually giving something back to the community. Now, granted, you probably don't want to give back to the community, but it's like, hey, you're staying here, you're incurring a debt, and by God, you're going to help pay it off. And you're going to help pay it off by improving our community. So I don't know, Josh, you have anything like off the top of your head? Again, I know I'm not talking about work release programs, but something very similar, right? You'd have chain gangs and stuff like that. And I guess I'd have to look at the history. I'm sure unions had something to do with getting rid of chain gangs and that type of stuff. But there's got to be something there, right, that they can do to help give back or be a benefit.
Yeah, no, I agree, and 100% unions. Well, it wasn't just unions that got rid of, helped get rid of the chain gangs. We used to have chain gangs, back in North Florida when I was a kid, and you'd see them out on the side of the road, working, and you'd have a deputy or corrections officer sitting on top of a horse with a shotgun, and working. So I think there are a number of things that they could do while they're incarcerated to get back to the community. I mean, you could turn around and take a look at the Civilian Conservation Corps. Back in after what was that, right after World War II. There's a number of jobs and tasks within the civil service, that could be done, and you could make it. It doesn't have to be, you're not going to set them in an office or something like that. It's not going to be fun work, but it's going to be work, and at the same time, I hate to say it, but at the same time, you have to figure out a way, not necessarily to compensate them, but you have to figure out a way to, outside of the education. Right now, they're getting education while they're in because they're locked down 23 hours a day, right? They don't get to, they're really only, outside for yard time and stuff like that. But they really need to learn a skill. That there's a skills gap, in the country. Micro talks about it all the time. They really need to learn a skill and then incentivize, provide incentives to businesses, to employers to hire them, after they're released. Now, obviously, let's say it's an oversimplification, but I mean that that briefs well, right? The implementation is there's a lot
Well,
of
even some type of like
there's
trade
a
or apprenticeship program, right? Where hey,
yeah
while
yeah
you're here, you're going through this for like if you've got a 5-year sentence, hey, we're going to send you here. You're going to learn to be a plumber, and oh by God, when you get out, this guy can hire you. You're going to have a job. You're going to pay taxes and hopefully stay out of prison again.
Yeah, no, 100%. And so, I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunities there. I mean, there's opportunities. Hey, guess what? The national parks are in disrepair, right? There is a number of things that need to be done in the national parks. Just the routine trail maintenance. That stuff has to be done. Like you said, picking up trash on the side of the highways, and it's not just that because it has to be more than just that because there's not a lot of jobs other unless you're going to go, right on the back of a garbage truck, which is fine. It's a job, and it's an honest day's work. But there's only so many jobs like that, out there, and walking down the side of the highway picking up trash is there's not a lot of people hiring for that. Once you get out of prison, so I think there's a lot that can be done. I think there's a lot that needs to be done. I take a little bit of a different stance on prison reform. If you're going to take someone and you're going to incarcerate them for whatever they did for however many amount of years, yes, they have to pay that penance for their crime. But at the same time, you can't be a revolving door, and the onus is on the system to make sure that it's not a revolving door. You have to provide them with some type of skill, some type of incentive to get back on the straight and narrow once they're released. If you don't give them a skill, but you kept them locked up for 20 years and you don't give them a skill, well, what do you expect them to do when you release them back out? You
Right.
provided them nothing. They still have to survive. They still have to eat, and live. So I think there's a lot that could be done that would benefit both the community and the individual, so they can succeed, and stay on that angelic ascendancy after their release, and it's on. It's society needs to take a harder look at that. There's there's daylight in between me and some of the those on the right when it comes to prison reform and stuff. Because I believe that, and whatever, that's fine, but we really need to do a better job than we're currently doing.
I agree. I agree with Josh. And on prison reform, put it to this way: I think it would be easier to do prison reform, or whatever you want to call it, justice reform. However, the entire process, I think it would be easier to transform that system than it would be the social welfare system. Put it to you that way. To start, now, I may say some comments that could piss off some of our listeners here because like Josh. I take a little bit different tack when it comes to the prison system for another number of reasons. I've been kicking around for years the idea of writing a book about the prison system and someone who's trapped in it. It'll be a fiction book, but it would be based on anecdotes and research that I've done over the years, much like Michael Crichton used to do with his books. Not that I would ever compare myself to that dude, but it would be along that tack. But keep your powder dry podcast. I talked to those guys not too long ago. I hope this doesn't piss you off too much, some of the stuff I'm going to say. But at the end of the day, I think you might agree with me. I lived in a prison, what became a prison town. Uh, Amarillo, Texas, got the Clements unit, which is a maximum security state facility. And a lot of jobs came into town. A lot of guys who either didn't go to college, my friends or whatever, and they were offering a lot of money. It was a state job. At first, it seemed like a great deal. So a lot of my friends, my close friends, went out there to be prison guards. And brother, I am sitting here to tell you without a doubt, it changed them. It changed them. I, and that it wasn't just age. I was a dumbass, snot nosed college kid, didn't know my ass from an elbow, and they were getting a whole new education on what the human experience is really like. It changed them. We've all been around and exposed to either prisons or detention facilities. And let me tell you right now, it desensitizes you very quickly. It almost teaches your brain at a subconscious level, the way they exist now, that it's not that you treat them any different, but you almost see humans as less because you're seeing the worst of humanity. And it just makes someone a different person. And this is where I'm going to get to the part where, and that's a problem, right? Along what you guys are saying, there needs to be a reform so that prisons don't desensitize the guards to where, they're just completely different people now. It should be almost a constructive type environment. And believe me, anybody who knows me well, especially you guys, I'm not a touchy-feely kind of guy. There are people who are the slime of humanity that I've talked to face. And yeah, it's a good thing we have a Bill of Rights, because I'm telling you, I know what this person did, and I would just as soon put a bullet through their head than let them walk the streets anymore. Okay, there are people like that in prison. But there are also people in prison who did less than what Brittany Griner did, and she is, welcomed home as a hero. Marijuana charges and stuff for simple possession. There are people in state prisons around this country who are in prison for simple possession. Whereas now the cops on the street at most states, if they see, whatever it is, a small amount of heroin, which could be used by 5 to 6 people, it's like all they do is dump it out, even though it's illegal in the state. They dump it out, no citation, no ticket, no nothing. They just dump it out because it's just marijuana. We're worried about fentanyl and meth and crack, right? Fentanyl and meth, basically. But back to what's going to piss off some of the LE that may listen to this. One trend I've been seeing is the pipeline into law enforcement, like a street cop, a sheriff's deputy, is straight through being a prison guard. That's the, I wouldn't say the bottom rung, but that's where a lot of them start. They get there and they're like, this is not for me. I need to go be a cop. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But you're getting a desensitized group to go straight into law enforcement. And it's because the prisons are messed up. They're not being run the way they need to be run, which I don't have all the solutions. I don't have all the answers. But I do know that they are set up to, and I know every prison's different. Every state's different. There are city jails, county jails, state prisons, maximum, minimum. There's all different levels of this stuff, but they're set up for the worst. When you're setting up a prison and designing a prison, you're setting up for the worst person. Now, afterwards, you can, segregate certain populations and things like that. But everybody's treated basically the same. And that's where I kind of, in line with you guys, is the way I understand it, a lot of the prison system is privately run, right? So there's an incentive to keep people in there. There's an incentive. You get paid per bed. You get paid per person that's in there. So it's in your best interest to have that thing as crowded as possible. If you're getting paid per head by the state or the federal or whatever, the county, whatever, if it's privately run. If it's run by the county, believe me, it is not in your best interest to have as many people in there as possible, because the sheriff's going to answer that to the taxpayer, who is also the voter. So the first step is stop privatizing it. Stop privatizing it, because that's one level removed from accountability. That's first thing. Second thing is more time spent on reforming the actual person, like Josh was saying. It's not just about work. It's about, people screw up. I think it is possible for people to reform, but like Josh said, like Roger said, there's got to be an incentive. What's the incentive? And I think a lot of it is just a symptom of our culture, a symptom of our society, that is a very, very, very heavy lift these days. What is the incentive to go out and bust your ass? Be a good man. You're 22 years old, you're in prison for, selling drugs on the street corner or whatever, and you're making, I don't know, $1,200 a week as a drug dealer. but no, we're going to convince you to go out and bust your ass digging ditches or whatever to make half that amount. What's the incentive? Plus you're considered a thug if you're out there on the street corner. You get some street cred for that. What kind of street cred do you get for busting your ass in your mid-20s so that maybe you can make enough money to ask a nice girl to marry you and have a family and provide for that family? Dog, that's lame these days. You know what I'm saying? I mean, Roger, you bring these things up that we could spend a whole episode on, because this topic is really fascinating and it's a big problem. But you bring these up when we have no time. I have no time to think about it, so I just have diarrhea of the mouth about it. Again, I'm not calling out any cops who started out in the prison system. I'm not doing that, but I think those cops might agree that maybe that wasn't the best place to start out. Because I do believe that cops should have a little bit of a little, not street smarts is the wrong way to say it, but like we were talking about last week, rapport, common connection, things like that. A way of relating to a person as a human being. And if you're a prison guard at a maximum security, that becomes more difficult. So I've talked enough, Roger. That was a really good question, though. He went into Barbara Walters mode again, folks.
I had another one, but I'll save it to see what happens. Is we started watching this series, and I'd had a couple drinks, and my wife had a couple drinks, and I start seeing this stuff, and obviously your perspective changes over, especially as a young Joe, and both of you guys know how it is, and a lot of our audience, when you're 18, jumping out of airplanes and this and that, you're like, hey, screw them all, just give them the needle, shoot them, execute them, whatever. And then as you get older and you actually start paying taxes, and you get a little more sympathetic, you get a little empathetic, you're not so myopic or everything. You start seeing this like, man, there is, and this, sounds inhumane, but there is a large pool of labor there. And Josh, both of you brought up a good point. It's two-sided. It's one, giving back to the community, and I'm not meaning in a good way, but like paying your debt to society. But then there's also the inmate side, that, hey, you do have to have some type of reform there for the individual. And granted, not everybody can be saved, right? Some people are going to hell. Newsflash. It's just going to happen. But I have to believe out of the 1.6 million people estimated that are in there, maybe you save 500,000. Maybe you save 100,000. Maybe you save 50,000. To some of these towns, I mean, it's huge, right? It's a huge number. And, I think it's an interesting thing. And again, we're not going to deep dive into this yet. Maybe we'll do an episode on one day, but Luke, you hit on the head. There's so many different levels and layers to the prison system. It's just, it's mind boggling to me that these are things that can really be implemented on a local level. Local probably being county, right? That's probably the lowest you could actually go to implement anything like this to make it worthwhile and money wise and this and that, as well as, prison population is going to be there for an extended period of time. So we're not talking about like your local cities or city jails or whatever, but it's just kind of amazing to me. And maybe they have. I mean, I've never really looked into it, but this should be a good, as the British would say, advertisement for mayor of Kingstown. So, maybe have a couple glasses of bourbon put on mayors of Kingstown or mayor of Kingstown, and you'll figure out why I started going down this path. So I know we're running pretty close on our limit here. Real quick before I throw it to Josh, just want to give a couple shout outs. Joe, it really is a lot of the same crew, a lot of the same core crew, but we do have a pretty decent following, have a pretty good following. We don't necessarily interact with everybody because whatever reason people get, they're busy doing things. They listen to us while they're commuting or what have you, but we do have a core group that interact with us, that continue to listen. Joe, Dan, Ginger Inferno. Hopefully he gets back to making flags. I'm trying to get him to make me a table, podcast table, and a table for my trailer. I just got to figure out how to get it out here without paying the $9,000. One, I don't want to put it on a Pete Buttigieg train because it'll probably never make it. It'll burn up somewhere in the middle of Texas. Ted, he always gives me some good feedback. Kind of surprised he continues to listen because he's pretty smart dude, probably smarter than all three of us combined, and he still finds interest in what we say. Gary, he's always, hey man, this and that, and some feedback. And I know he's going to be listening to this episode as well. Don't forget about his charity that we mentioned earlier. And Chris, so, he was one of our early episodes, and he told me to tell you guys, screw you guys. He does not play his recruiting episode over and over again. That is not why we were at 1,000 plays in that. So, it's kind of weird because there are a lot of folks there that continue to listen that, one, I'm surprised that they listen. And it's also kind of weird when like folks that and folks that you're close with continue to listen, that like, hey, they actually want to hear, what you have to say. So with that, thanks everybody for listening to me. I think we covered a lot here, so I'll kick it over to Josh for your final thoughts, brother.
All right. Yeah. No, absolutely thank y'all to listen. As we always say, your time is the most important thing you can give to us. I had a lot of shout outs. I'm going to save those for next episode. The one shout out I will do, on February 11th, a guy that Luke and I served with at Fort Bragg passed away unexpectedly. Tom Sullivan, everybody called him Sully. Just an absolute great human being. Larger than life. Sully always had a smile on his face, no matter how shitty the situation was. Sully was that guy when he walked into a room. If you were feeling down, if you were upset, he would say something that would make you laugh and instantly make you feel better. He had that, as we all do, he had that 12-year-old boy, sense of humor. And probably one of my favorite Sully memories is we were at a party one night and Sully decided that he was going to pull his zipper down and he was going to walk around, with some of that stuff that hides behind that zipper, just kind of like hanging out. And he walked around like like it was just normal, drinking a beer, hanging out, talking, chatting, and he would just wait for somebody to notice it. And he would be like, when somebody would be like, "Oh, what are you doing, dude?" He'd look down, he'd be like, "Oh, I was having some gum," and he would he was just this big bellicose laugh, and and he would just go on to the next person to torture them. And so he's just a really good human being. He's going to be missed, and the world's a little poor without him. So prayers, for his family. He left behind a wife and kids, and so keep that family in your prayers. And Tom, we'll miss you. And yeah, man, that's all I got.
Oh, Sully, he's truly one of a kind, wasn't he? He was one of the best interrogators I ever saw, because even though he's one of those guys that he could see straight through you to what made you laugh, but he could also see your weaknesses. I mean, the guy could see straight through you, and he could, if you pissed him off for whatever reason, he would say something that would cut anyone straight to the bone. And I don't know, I don't know, I don't know if that's an Irish trait. I don't know, but I got to tell this one Sully thing. We were about to go to Kosovo because we were going to get hip deep in hand grenade pins back when Kosovo was the only thing going. And we're at Fort Benning, and he busts into my room. And he goes, "Let's go get a tattoo." And I was like, "Okay." Next question: what are you going to get? I don't know. And I got the dumbest tattoo ever, but I was like, Sully is this Irish dude with these giant forearms. So I was like, I've got the thing for you. And remember that scene in Boondock Saints where they go into the arms room? You remember that? Where they're about to do their first heist when all those guns on the wall? Well, on the back of the wall was this Irish flag with these two banners that kind of streamed, very thing. And it said something like, "For this we will defend and we will not," whatever. Some Irish saying with the E's at the end of, old, you know. And I was like, "You need to get that." And I fast forwarded because it was DVDs back then. I was playing it on my computer, and I paused that part, and I was like, "You need to get that flag on your forearm." And he was like, "Hell yeah!" Because it was perfect. He's this big Irish bull, bellicose, like Josh said. So we go down to a tattoo place, and I get my stupid tattoo on my back that I still regret and want to get covered up as this dumb tribal thing. At the top, it's not a tramp stamp. It's at the top of my back, but it's almost as bad. But he got this badass Irish flag. And so we get back from Kosovo, and all of a sudden, everybody, I don't know, 9/11 had happened. We got back. So now all of a sudden, everybody's worried about extremists and everything. So they called everybody, if you have a tattoo on your body, we need to take a picture of it. So we all had to go in. And you remember that was around 2001, 2002. So they take pictures of all our tattoos, and Sully gets called into CID or who the hell ever. Because of a tattoo on his forearm. And it was an Irish Republican Army tattoo. And he's like, "I'm not a terrorist. I swear this guy, Luke." The world is truly, I got to throw this out there. And it's one of those questions that we struggle with as veterans, and one of those things where, a friend of ours, Ryan, thank you for telling us that, Ryan's one of those guys that can give you bad news. Sometimes you don't want to tell people bad news. And Ryan told us, we really appreciate that, Ryan, but he included something in there of natural causes. And, part of you's like, well, it wasn't suicide, and you're not any happier about it, but it makes my soul happier, I guess, that he wasn't miserable. He was a happy man. And yeah, shout out to Sully, and I'll save the rest of my shout outs to later too, Josh. That was a good call. And yeah, pour a little drink out for Sully, because believe me, or at least when I knew him, he liked to have a drink or two. And until next time, keep your canteen cups full and tightly secured.